Good morning, everybody, and welcome. I'm going to talk a bit about probably the most important topic of the day, I'd go as far to say, and a topic that I spend my life dealing with, I think, these days. So, as I say, I'm Matt Townend, I'm Managing Director and founder of Cavell, and I spend a lot of my time on the consulting side, so working with service providers around the world on strategy, and also working a lot with investors and PE investors. So I kind of deal with this quite a lot. So what is the margin dilemma? Well, the margin dilemma I hear a lot of times is growth has slowed a bit in the market, so I'm struggling because the growth isn't quite what I used to get, but we're still growing. We're growing, Matt, but what we're growing with often is a product or service that has lower core margin in it. So although we may not be churning at a faster, at a massive rate, effectively we're replacing revenue that we had before, to give examples. Let's say we were selling Operator Connect or something, and we're selling maybe at $6 or $7 or something around that per seat, and maybe, I should use UK. Gosh, we're in the UK. I'm spending too much time in the US. We're selling at that sort of price, where before we would be selling a loaded cloud comm seat maybe at $15, to $20 or pounds, depending on which market you're in. So we've kind of got this challenge. So it's not that we're not growing, and it's not that we're churning faster than we grow, but what we're replacing is at a lower margin, and that's causing some challenges. So where people are getting margin in the future and getting margin from now aren't the traditional places we have. So we're not necessarily generating it just from pure product. So certainly in a number of markets, we got hooked to just selling product that had really strong margin, and we could train a channel. It maybe looked a little bit like a PBX they used to sell before, and they could go out and sell it, and we were all extremely happy. But as margins have been squeezed, not only from a pricing point of view, but also in some cases the residuals that some of the providers were providing, as we've seen that squeezed, we're also seeing a go-to-market challenge. We're seeing that some of the models that we used to utilize, maybe there isn't the same margin available to all the parties who took place in that value chain. So we're seeing some challenges around the go-to-market approach. And we're also facing some fundamental challenges to the way some of us created value historically. So some of us might have been service providers, and we made money because we were excellent at delivering networks and platforms, and that's kind of our core strength. And that's what we leveraged for years. But now, wait a second, somebody else might be running that platform to some degree. So how do I continue to create value as a business myself? So I talk to a number of businesses who, if I talked to them a few years ago, would say we were a service provider and we really drove money from the way we create and build products within our own platforms. And now some of those people are saying to me, actually, we're a distributor, Matt. I've just realized, actually, we've got really good distribution channels we built up over years, and actually that's our core strength. So some of the companies that, when you think about that, I won't necessarily mention them by name, but I've sat down with some of the biggest telcos and players in the UK market, and some of the C-level people who are rethinking kind of where they sit and how they create value. So I think that's the dilemma. And also at the same time, we're maybe being asked to create new skills. So one of the other big questions, and some of you have seen me present on this, is that the end customer requirement, unfortunately, is getting more complex during this process. So we've got a more complex end customer requirement sometimes. And the other dilemma is, where do the skills sit? So if I suddenly need to get into CX, because I see that as a huge opportunity, well, who provides me the skills to do that? can I just do it because I've got a product which is really productized, or do I need to create skills? And how can I make a business out of that? So there's a real sort of challenge. And then finally, have I got a suitable OSS, BSS that will enable me to move into this new world? And we saw a bit about that earlier, and there's a number of people will be talking about that during the day. So this is some of the dilemma that I'm dealing with, but it's a fundamental kind of dilemma that investors and service providers are having, which is, wait, my cheese has moved. I used to make money out of product. I made really good margin. I was set up to sell product. I got distribution channels who just make money out of that core product. And wait a second, it's not quite as good as it used to be. And therefore, what do I do? And some people do nothing. I would not advise that as a very viable long-term strategy. So when we talk to people, and I'm just using the Microsoft example here because we did some Microsoft research recently, but I think it's kind of interesting about where people feel they make money around that enablement product at the moment, and where people think they might make it in the future. So this was talking to a group of service providers around the world about where they see they make money. And a lot of them still believe they do make money through the enablement of the telephony today. And create and manage services around that. And to the point earlier, we heard that people are, make money out of the hardware, etc. But where people think they're going to make it in the future is more around creating value-added services. So creating, offering value-added services around that core. That telephony enablement, the actual selling of the voice piece, maybe diminishes, and then you're going to make more money from creating value around that. Whether that's value-added services, whether that's professional services, whether that's verticalization. It's kind of that switch which the industry is going through. And I've had the pleasure, and some of you have had the unfortunate pleasure of me sitting on the other side of the table when I've been doing commercial due diligence on your business. But when I'm sitting there, some people laughing in the front row who've had that mispleasure. When I've looked at a lot of the businesses who are in this space, they've made money around these enablement areas through creating new services, creating microservices, making money around the pieces, adding value-added services. So it's not quite, I've looked at a lot of the businesses you would know who were in the early Microsoft enablement space, and a lot of them were very successful, but they just had to think a little bit broader than just making money out of the product, the core product. So it's not like there isn't an opportunity, there definitely is, but it's just thinking broader because you're not going to make it in exactly the same way as before. So the kind of lessons, and some of this has been discussed before, but where I've seen people kind of build a value is certainly around supplementary telephony services. So building microservices and creating capabilities around the core telephony, whether that's things like disaster recovery and others, thinking a bit broader around core capabilities. We've certainly seen people focusing on mobile integration. We're going to hear more about that and thinking about how I can bring that to the market, because generally the enablement platforms haven't been great themselves at doing that, so there's been opportunity there. We've heard a bit earlier from all the three guys we had up earlier about selling broader across their platform capabilities. And the big area we hear a lot about is integration and verticalization. So we see that as a key thing. And when I talk to PE particularly, and there's some around here, around here in this meeting, you can normally tell them because they normally got gilets on. It's quite warm, but they normally wear gilets. If you're looking for a PE person, I'm looking around, we haven't got any PE people, we're okay in the room. But I wear, I had mine on earlier, but they are normally now very interested in vertical businesses. So they've suddenly become more and more interested in vertical businesses because of the stickiness if you get the integration done right. And some of you will know in the UK, people like Exxon that Focus bought has been a real big part of their growth because of that verticalization. I was talking to our friends at WaveNet about managed offices. Everybody's got kind of a vertical they've done pretty well. The other area there is value, and we heard a little bit about it earlier, is really making that migration process easy. The biggest challenge is probably the expansion into pro services. So as we get into more of these complex areas, maybe whether it's CCaaS or it's complexity, we certainly need to automate, which we've heard a lot about. But how do you create pro services and provide the advice to that end customer is a challenge. And whether the vendor can help you with that, or whether you do that yourself, that is a kind of a big challenge and a big discussion point I have with lots of businesses. The biggest area we saw is value-added services, and you've got a room full of value-added services. So if you look out those doors, you will find a load of businesses who are providing value on top of these enablement platforms, and that is where you can really push up the ARPU. And the other area, which a number of people you will also have seen who are sponsoring the event, is creating global services. For the first time, you can leverage the platforms, and we're going to hear from Zoom next, and we can hear how you can leverage their platform presence to actually start to serve global customer requirements. Well, 10 years ago, if you wanted to serve a global customer out of the UK for voice, it was really very difficult. You probably wouldn't even bother. And I think there's still a little bit of that DNA in us, the UK guys who are in the room, that's still there. So, I recently challenged all the investors who are in the MSPs. Why is it that you're the only group who don't really seem to be selling globally? I think there is an opportunity now with these platforms, if you partner with these guys, also to leverage their capability for global services. So we've seen quite a bit of expansion there. So that is kind of where I'm going to stop for the moment, but I think that's hopefully keying up the whole of the next section. We're going to hear from Richard's looking like I'm not keyed him up well, but anyway, we're going to talk about Zoom, who are one of the key platforms who can help you, I believe, kind of take some of that opportunity. But also, we're then going to have a panel where people are going to talk about that dilemma and how they're addressing it and where they think they can grow within this. So, with no further ado, I hope that has set up the debate. I am going to hand over to Richard, who is, I've known for years, so I was just making sure I got the title right. Richard, I've known for years, who's head of channel and business development at Zoom, who will give you an insight about how you can monetize your base and maybe help with that margin dilemma. Thank you very much.